Speaking of top 10,
Yeah,
I want to
yeah,
get to this.
yeah. So we had leading off the prelim portion of UFC 268, Edmen Shahbazyan versus Nassourdine Imavov. Two guys going in the complete opposite directions in their careers. Um, we'll get into Edmen more specifically because you're much more critical of him leading into this fight than I was, and I'm sure especially after this fight. So the stage for Edmen, very quick summary, super high on Dana's list before. He won on the Contender Series, and then he won after the Contender Series. He won his first three. Yeah, he won on the Contender Series, and then I didn't realize Darren Stewart's fight was on the Ultimate Fighter. So whatever, he wins Contender Series, wins on Ultimate Fighter, and then his first three UFC fights, he wins those. So anytime, especially Dana White has a guy that's coming through the Contender Series and is doing well, he's going to love them because it's his namesake show. So this guy was on the top of the list. Remember when they were talking about, oh, this guy might be the youngest UFC champion ever because he was at the time, I think 22 when he was going to fight Derek Brunson. So they were thinking this guy might be on a fast track to fighting Izzy which is hilarious to say now, to maybe become the youngest UFC champion in history. And then he has the fight against Derek Brunson, which he was over a 3-1 favorite, which I thought was nuts. He gets demolished. And then, as if that's not a tough loss enough, he comes back to fight Jack Hermanson, gets demolished. And then it's like, all right, fine. He fought two tough guys. Maybe we give him like a confidence booster. No, let's give him a guy who's on the up and up in Nassourdine Imavov.
The sniper.
And he gets crushed again. We'll dive into Edmen a little more because we discussed him before. But in terms of this fight, I don't know. I don't even know where to start because there was some pros and cons for Edmen, and then there was mostly pros for Imavov. Imavov's it's an animal, man. I don't know. I don't really
he trains with Cyril Gane, and you could see it in his style. You know, the way he throws his little feints, they're those kind of small little hip movements that he does to throw the little feints with the legs. And I think that if Imavov continues down this trajectory, you might see a very, very, very powerful contender in the middleweight series in the form of Nassourdine Imavov. And again, don't discount Cyril Gane being in his corner. As much as I'm not a fan of at least definitely not Gane's last fight with Biggie Boy. I don't think it should have gone down the way that it did. Credit to Gane, but Biggie Boy really shit the bed on that. Having that guy in your corner, it shows, man. It shows in the skill level that was brought to fore. And like you were saying, man, the matchup was interesting in the sense that they're both strikers. Whereas Hermanson and Brunson absolutely incorporate that wrestling and that grappling into their repertoire. So it almost felt like they were trying to throw Edmen a bone, maybe like, hey, we know you can't do the ground thing here. Here's a striker. Maybe you could try to do something against him. But I don't know, man. It's very disappointing.
I don't know about it being a bone, but I do agree with the fact that, okay, here's someone that's going to be on the feet with you. He's not going to try and take the fight to the ground.
Yeah.
You had hedged on your parlays with both these dudes.
Very, very small though. It was very, very small.
But like, if money not on the table, who was your pick going to be? Imavov?
Imavov, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So my pick, money or no money, was going to be Edmen for the reason of, I'm like, okay, this is going to be a stand-up fight. I like Edmen's stand-up game against a fair amount of the middleweight division, to be honest, because of the power he has because he's a big 185. I mean, this guy could probably easily be, I shouldn't say easily, but he could fight against a decent amount of light heavyweights, I would say, Edmen, because he's a big dude. He's young, but he's very big. I think his walk-around weight, if I were to guess, is probably at least, 215. At least, I would guess. So he's a pretty big 185er. And you can see it when he's fighting. I mean, he's a big guy, especially for 24 now, whatever he is. And he's got the power. We've seen his power in his victories. And even in some of his losses, you see it. But the biggest knocks on him leading up to this fight were obviously the ground game is susceptible to damage and also the gas tank. And those two can go hand in hand, right? In that if you're taken to the ground non-stop, and then if a guy's laying on top of you and you got to take on the weight of a 185 pounder, and your gas tank is already kind of whatever, you're going to be depleted. So now it's like, all right, let's take away the ground game element and keep it on the stand-up. Because in his 2 losses, when, more so in the Hermansson fight, the first round, actually, no, even in the Brunson fight, he won, I think, both those first rounds. And, like, he was kind of pacing himself well, especially in that Hermansson fight. It's just when the fight got to the ground is when he got screwed. So in this fight, again, it was a patient performance up until I think what his downfall was, and I told you guys, was why the hell did he try and make this a wrestling match? Was he very? Yeah, he was almost like very insistent on proving, hey, I trained with DC.
Yeah, no, I found that really interesting too. I mean, he landed one, so that's kudos to him on that. But my overall, I mean, just looking at the fight, he's sloppy, dude. It's not just that he has no gas tank. It's not just that he can't fight on the ground. He's not tight. Like when he goes toe to toe with somebody, you could tell that he's just, the power comes in and that's it. Like that's all this guy is. It's just power. And that doesn't get you that far. Not in this division, at least. Like maybe if you were a heavyweight, you could just start swinging your arms around and clocking guys and move up like that.
Or doing kicks like Chris Barnett.
Yeah, but if middleweight division, you need to be very well-rounded. You need to be tight. You can't be sloppy. You have to be a very smart fighter to make it up there. And at this point, if they don't knock him, I don't know how far down he'll drop in the rankings. I don't think
I think he's going to be out of the rankings.
He should be. He absolutely should be at this point. It's the performance is not there. And I think the hype is quite honestly not well deserved.
The hype I think was already dead entering this fight. And if it wasn't, now it is.
Yeah, no, it should be completely squashed at this point, man. What they're going to do with him, I don't know, especially considering that his compatriot, also at the same gym, is performing phenomenally.
We'll discuss him too, but...
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
To quickly touch on that point you just made, they actually one reporter asked a question about Edmen to Dana after the fights. Did you happen to catch that one?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, so for those that maybe didn't, the reporter asked, hey, what do we do with Edmen now, given that he was, super hyped up, and now he lost 3 in a row. And Dana was like, I don't know. We'll give him one more fight. And then he was pretty ambiguous in his response in terms of what happens after that one fight, which is fair, honestly. I mean, how many people lose 4 fights in a row in the UFC and stick around?
Marcos.
Oh, God.
Hey, you asked the question. Yeah. I gave you an answer, man.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's the person you want to be in the rankings with. So, and again, especially, we discussed it at least twice already, especially in the weight class that he's in.
Yeah.
There are plenty of unranked guys that are more than qualified to become a ranked fighter. So the UFC is not, starving for middleweights. So if he's not going to be able to hang with the other middleweights, he's either going to have to look. I mentioned this before his last fight, I think, or after his last fight. I want to see him at 205, dude. Fight at a weight class where it's weird to say, because I was going to say where maybe the ground game isn't as big of an element, but then he just lost the stand-up game that he did make it into a ground game though. So it's very conflicting with him, because we've discussed his corner before. The UFC, the commentators have, other people that are more knowledgeable than us have discussed his corner before because of Ronda. Ronda's the reason that his coach Edmund has become well known, because of the whole head movement thing and questionable technique against Holly Holm, questionable coaching there. So it's kind of become a laughingstock, that gym, among some of the people in the UFC and MMA community. So you wonder, when we've discussed it internally, we've discussed it on the show, like, should a corner change have happened already? But then, okay, let's say sure, or at least a different thing. He goes to AKA though. He went to AKA for a couple months. DC said he was there for a couple months. So, okay, maybe you didn't fully change your corner, but you did train elsewhere. And a place like that, he was training with the Dagestanis, and he fought a Dagestani, and he still wasn't really successful with it.
Well, he fought a Frenchman, all right? He fought a Frenchman.
No, he's actually Dagestani, though.
Yeah, I don't care. He lives in France, right?
He speaks French. He's French.
He's a Frenchman to me, man.
So, yeah, okay, good. He landed a takedown, but he didn't do anything with it. And if anything, his wrestling, I think, is why he lost. He put himself in very compromising positions. in a way, credit to him for not tapping out, because some of those chokes by Imavov, number one, he was so fluid in capturing those submissions, but also he had them pretty good in those too. So credit to Edmen on that front, where he was able to not succumb and tap, but he also did put himself in those positions. Because we discussed, he kept getting taken to the ground and he was getting demolished by Hermansson and Brunson. This time he took himself to the ground. It's almost like he wanted to prove a point of, look, I can do it on the ground. And then he put himself in the same positions he was in the other fights.
Yeah,
except this time it wasn't because of Imavov, it was because of himself. So it seems like he's a man that's conflicted.
It's not that he's conflicted. I think he's getting bad advice, man. Because even if you go train, let's say with DC, it doesn't matter how long you go there for. If somebody's telling you, hey, you incorporate some wrestling, shoot, blah, blah, blah. That's the wrong advice to give him, because we know he cannot perform on the ground. So what you should have told him is incorporate everything we've taught you into not getting taken down. You know what I mean? Like, don't go down. Use this to prevent people from taking you down, and do what you do best, swing. Use those freaking arms of yours, So I think he actually was given some really poor advice, because it makes no sense. Why would you? You know that you can't do it. It's not a question of, well, maybe I could prove. You can't. We've seen it. You should know this. If your corner was any good, they would have told you this, and you would not have, had to suffer through that. I think he could have traded with Imavov on the feet. So
100%. He was. He briefly was.
Yeah, he took the first round.
Did this fight end the second or first?
The second.
Do we have the scorecards?
I do.
Did they give it the first round?
10-9. Unanimous.
They did give it to Edmen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and if you want to look at the stats, you want to look at the reasoning
also,
why.
By the way, same way for the Hermansson fight. I believe Edmen took the first round of that one as well.
So again, it's not, and so this is a two-way street. It's the fighter and the corner. The corner needs to be giving him the right advice, and the takedown attempts, I think, it was probably not Edmen, but it was the corner telling him to do it, which was.
I don't know, actually. I actually feel like it was the opposite. I don't know if they necessarily told him don't take him down or do take him down. But again, it almost seemed, the way I was interpreting it was like, this seems like a man that's trying to prove a point, in that you guys kept saying, I suck at this, I suck at this. I trained with one of the best wrestlers there were, so I'm going to show you what I've done.
Yeah, against the guy that trains with Cyril Gahn.
Huh?
Against the guy that trains with Cyril Gahn.
Hey, look, I'm not saying it's necessarily right, but the way because he was, again, I'm like, why is he so insistent on doing this? 5 takedown attempts? 5? Who the hell are you? 5? And we still had another round to go.
I think the best thing for this guy, if he's to actually stay in the division or in the promotion period, he needs to change his environment. I don't think that's conducive to his success. I think he needs to have a complete mental shift. If this is something you really want to do, you're trying to go for a belt. If that's what your goal is, you need to pick your shit up, go to Vegas or Florida or Denver even, go train at some of these gyms that will get you there. Because doing it here with all the distractions of, let's say, family, of all that, man, it's not conducive to you becoming a champion. Get up and go somewhere, change your mentality. You can do it. You just have to put in that, it's hard, man, especially when you're attached to all the stuff that we're attached to when we're here, but you got to do it, man, if that's your goal. Because you're clearly distracted here. You're not focused when you're in LA, when you're in your hometown. You don't have that focus, and it shows in your fighting.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with most of that. Honestly, I say this partly jokingly and partly not jokingly. Dude, go and chill with Arman Tsarukyan. I partly say it jokingly. I partly say it seriously. Of the Armenian fighters in the UFC, that guy's stock is the greatest. We've said this before internally. We haven't really discussed it too much, I think, on our recordings. But that guy does not live in Glendale. He does not train with the Glendale Armos. He's training in Russia. He's training at American Top Team. He's training in Thailand.
He's training with Khabib. I think he trained with Khabib a little bit. Definitely Piotr.
Well, also so did Edmen. But he's training with Piotr Jan. He does train with him. I don't know how consistently, but he has trained with him as well. But you see it in the performances. Again, a little bit of grain of salt. Most of who Tsarukyan has fought, he's been way better than them. But the one person that he lost to is the one guy whose stock is like absolutely like Berkshire Hathaway price high, and that's Islam Makhachev, right? To this date, the most difficult fight for Islam Makhachev, excluding his one loss, was against Arman Tsarukyan, and that was his UFC debut. So, you want to get better on the ground, go work with your fellow blood brother. I'm sure that guy can teach you plenty. Yeah, again, it didn't work out. I'm not even going to say the AKA was a waste of time. I just think strategy-wise, it wasn't. They should have been abandoned a little bit sooner.
Yeah,
there was a little bit of success, sure, but I think it was overly pursued. I do think the change of scenery you mentioned could help, or at least a more diverse thing. I don't want to completely crap on Edmond, the trainer. Maybe a more diversification. He did a little bit of the AKA, but I really do think if we take him out of the States, put him, and now I'm completely taking away from the joking aspect. Now let's seriously take him, train with Tsarukyan. You know him. Go test that out. I mean, at this point, what do you have to lose? You've lost 3 in a row. At this point, it's
no, your contract is on the line, man. You need to do something drastic, and I think more of the same.
I'm not completely hopeless on him, because even in his losses, we have seen why he was hyped up the way he was. It's just it immediately crashes when it gets to the ground.
Yeah.
That's what's frustrating, because you see when he's on his feet what he's capable of, because he wins. He won the first round against Hermanson. He won the first round against Imavov. I think he won 1 or 2 rounds I think he won the first round again against Brunson. So that's why I had taken him against Imavov, because I'm like, this is going to be it's going to be a stand-up game. I like his stand-up against a lot of the middleweights, to be frank. And then he's the one that compromised it in the end. So, and you have to get factor. He's still super young. So it's not like we're talking about a 30-something-year-old or even a late 20-something-year-old where you're like, this guy's just not going to get it. So far, in the last 3 fights, he hasn't put together a complete performance. He's put like 5 to 10 minute performances out of 15, 5 to 7 minute performances out of 15.
Yeah.
And that's the issue. He's a tough dude, obviously, honestly. He got his ass kicked yesterday. He got his ass kicked against Hermanson, and he got his ass kicked against Brunson. But he endures until it gets to the point where when they do finish him, it's like, all right, like, that's because he was caught in the crucifix and he had nothing to do. He was crucified on the mat, just getting dumped by Imavov. But prior to that, we mentioned it. Some serious submission attempts by Imavov, and somehow he didn't tap out. It was almost Volkanovski-esque. I'm waiting for him to tap out. I'm like, this guy's going to pass out, and somehow he doesn't. And he ends up, able to, Imavov tires out on those submissions, or maybe he was smart enough to abandon the submission.
Yeah, well, he definitely improved his performance, but again, like I think I pretty much said whatever I needed to say about this, and just in summary, change your scenery, go somewhere else. I think your contract is absolutely on the line, especially after Dana's comments during the post conference.
Yeah.
I don't think he has much time left, man. I think there needs to be a drastic change made. But to your point, he is young, so we could see a situation where maybe he goes to another promotion, gets some work done over there, comes back to the UFC. In the worst case scenario, that could potentially be something that happens. We've seen that before. But if you want to stay in the UFC, you need to do something, and you need to do it very, very soon and very quickly, because you can't keep doing more of the same, man. It's not working.
The final thing I do want to say about him, yeah, he's lost 3 in a row, but he has fought 3 legitimate people.
Sure.
It's not like he's losing to, whatever.
Yeah, but if you want the belt, what more?
I don't disagree, but there are some guys when they lose, you're like, dude, you shouldn't beat that guy. So it's like it's the losses he's had. It's like if you're gonna lose, at least you're losing to, like, for example, he beat Jack Marshman. Like if he had lost to him, that sounds like, dude, you should have beat him. Now, okay, so the people he's lost to, 2 of before Imavov were 2 top 10 guys. Granted, he was top 10, but still, they're legitimate competition. So my point in that is, like, he's competing with the best of the division. He's just not beating them yet. And I think part of that really is the age. I think he got to where he got to a little bit too quickly. The Fight Pick guys, I think it was them that mentioned that they were surprised that Edmen's people accepted this fight against Imavov. And the what they were alluding to was like Imavov is really good, and you've already lost to 2 guys in a row. Is this really good for his confidence to lose 3 in a row, especially given that he's young? Edmen leading up to this fight during those little like interviews before was saying, my mental state's at the best place it's been. And maybe it was, and hopefully it was. So hopefully, if that's the case, this doesn't completely get him to a tough spot. But I don't know, we discussed before, like we would like to see him be more active, right? Given that he's young, let's see him a little bit more. Now I'm kind of in the party of maybe take not like a break from training, but like take like a step back and do like maybe a full evaluation of, all right, let's reset and see where we're trying to go. What's the next move? Like, let's maybe, I don't think you're going to get a ranked guy again. At least not yet, not the next fight. You shouldn't really. I think a full assessment's needed on his side and his corner side. Collectively, got to look at everything together and say, okay, what are we seriously going to do next? I really don't know what the involvement of Ronda is with him. I know they say he's his manager. What that means, I don't know. It's like the same way there's people that are executive producers. They really do anything? Probably not. So I wonder if she needs to be involved. Let's have like this full family gathering of, all right, what are we doing now? Because they do really need to seriously look at it. Because there's other guys who are very quick to say, get him out of the UFC, right? This guy's pretty close. He's almost there. So that's kind of the last thing I had to say on that. So good. Again, we talked a lot about him, and that's because we have a little bit of Homerism on Edmen. But not to take away anything from Imavov. This guy's an absolute animal.
Monster, dude.
Absolute animal.
Monster.
So
yeah.
big victory for him. Very decisive way that he won. And I'm very fascinated to see what happens with this guy now. Because they said he completely just snatched Edmen's ranking from him. And now he's the one that's got he should have hype around him if he doesn't. And again, like I mentioned, out of Cyril Gahn's gym, Francis's former gym. Let's see what happens next with Imavov.